At age 85, Ali MacGraw has finally stopped protecting the dead. Everyone thought she married the King of Cool, but at 85, Ali MacGraw finally admits she was living with a monster. To the staring public, their union was the ultimate Hollywood fairy tale, the Ivy League beauty from Love Story, taming the rugged rebel in a sun-drenched bohemian paradise. But behind the heavy locked doors of their secluded Malibu beach house, the reality was a suffocating horror show. MacGraw wasn't living a dream, she was surviving a daily siege. The man the world worshipped as a free spirit was, in private, a paranoid tyrant who demanded she abandon her soaring career to become his domestic servant. The castle on Trancas Beach was actually a prison, where she scrubbed floors to appease a husband whose jealousy was as legendary as his blue eyes. Every glance at another man sparked an explosion. Every attempt at independence was crushed by psychological warfare. Why did the most desirable woman of the 1970s surrender her life to a man who treated her like property? The answer lies in a devastating cycle of control that turned the world's most famous romance into a tragic nightmare. Before we start, don't forget to press that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's begin.
The year was 1972, and the location was a dusty, sweat-drenched set in Texas. The movie was The Getaway, a gritty crime thriller that would soon become infamous not for its plot, but for the nuclear explosion of chemistry between its leads. Ali MacGraw, the refined Ivy League star of Love Story, walked onto the set and locked eyes with Steve McQueen, the jagged-edged king of cool. The air didn't just crackle, it burned. Crew members recall the atmosphere as thick with tension, where the script became irrelevant. Their attraction was instant, animalistic, and impossible to hide. It wasn't just a fling, it was a demolition. Within months, they had torched their respective marriages, MacGraw leaving Paramount producer Robert Evans, and McQueen ending his volatile union with Neil Adams to be together.
To the public, it looked like the ultimate romantic conquest. The bad boy had found his perfect counterweight, a love story written in the stars. But looking back, MacGraw realizes that what felt like electric passion was actually the first tightening of a noose. That mesmerizing intensity wasn't just desire, it was an overwhelming obsession that she mistook for safety. She didn't see that the man who wanted to consume her entire world would eventually demand that she have no world left but him. The ultimatum was absolute. The career had to die. Steve made it clear that there was only room for one star in the McQueen household, and it wasn't going to be her. At the very peak of her fame, with the world begging for her next movie, Ali MacGraw fired her agent. She didn't just turn down scripts, she ghosted the entire industry to become a full-time servant to his ego. He told her he wanted a traditional wife, but what he really wanted was a woman with no options. The daily reality was a shocking fall from grace. The woman who had charmed millions was suddenly reduced to a domestic worker in her own home. There were no assistants, no nannies, and no cooks. Steve wanted his dinner on the table at 6 o'clock sharp every single night, and Ali was the one who had to make it. She spent her days scrubbing toilets, waxing floors, and cleaning windows that were already spotless, just to keep him calm. The clock became her enemy. If the food was late, the silence in the house turned terrifying. It wasn't just about chores, it was about dominance. She stopped reading scripts and started reading recipes, trying to shrink herself small enough to fit inside his insecurities. She cut off friends he didn't like and stopped going out because he was jealous of the eyes that followed her. She traded the adoration of fans for the isolation of a house where she walked on eggshells. If she wasn't cleaning, she was waiting for him to come home, waiting for his mood to shift, waiting for permission to exist. She convinced herself this was what a good wife did, stripping away her own power piece by piece until she felt completely hollow. She was trapped in paradise, suffocated by the demands of a man who loved her submission more than he loved her.
But submission wasn't enough to quell the demons living in Steve's head. The domestic routine quickly warped into a surveillance state. Steve's insecurity didn't just loom over the house, it hunted her. He became convinced that the world was conspiring to take her back, turning every errand into an interrogation, to the market and back. If the dial showed even 2 extra miles, the accusation wasn't that she took a scenic route, it was that she was meeting a lover. He saw threats in empty rooms. If they drove past a construction site and a worker glanced at the car, Steve would explode, accusing Ali of inviting the attention, of flirting with her eyes. He was a man tormented by the idea that he couldn't own a person completely, and he punished her for his own nightmares.
If you're enjoying this video, please hit the like. It's free and really helps the channel grow. Oh, by the way, I will be posting more videos like this, so please subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another deep dive from me. Living under that microscope, Ali began to disintegrate. She wasn't just a housewife, she was a hostage in a luxury prison, constantly audited for crimes she hadn't committed. But while she was busy trying to survive his emotional warfare, she missed the most dangerous trap he was setting. Because while Steve was obsessively counting the miles on her car, he was ensuring that when the end finally came, she wouldn't just be broken-hearted, she would be financially obliterated. The hypocrisy was suffocating. While Steve was running a forensic audit on her trip to the grocery store, he was living a completely different reality outside the gates. He had turned Ali into a prisoner of his own paranoia, yet he roamed free, indulging in the very behaviors he accused her of. He wasn't just jealous, he was projecting. Steve was a serial cheater. While Ali was at home, isolating herself to prove her loyalty, Steve was disappearing for days at a time. He slept with extras, groupies, and even the wives of friends. When he came home, he didn't offer apologies, he offered gaslighting. He treated his infidelity as a masculine right, a byproduct of his needs, while treating her existence as a suspicious activity. If she challenged him, he would flip the script, claiming his possessiveness was just proof of how much he loved her, while his affairs were meaningless. He was punishing her for imaginary crimes, while he committed real ones in broad daylight. But the emotional abuse was only half the trap. The steel jaws of his betrayal were actually hidden in a stack of papers she had signed before the wedding. In the haze of their early romance, Steve had presented Ali with a prenuptial agreement. At the time, Ali was the biggest female star in the world, fresh off the massive success of Love Story. She didn't care about money, she cared about him. She signed the document without a second thought, believing it was just a formality to soothe his fragile ego. She thought she was proving her love. In reality, she was signing her own financial death warrant. The terms were draconian. The agreement stipulated that in the event of a divorce, Ali would receive absolutely nothing. No alimony, no division of assets, no support. When the marriage finally imploded, after she had sacrificed 5 years of her prime career, rejected millions of dollars in movie roles, and served as his maid and cook, Steve enforced the contract to the letter. He cast her out with 0. She walked away from the marriage famous, recognized on every street corner, yet utterly destitute. She had traded her empire for a man who left her penniless, broken, and alone, to rebuild a life she had burned to the ground for him. The ink on the divorce papers was barely dry when the real punishment began. Ali MacGraw didn't just lose a husband, she lost her identity. At 40 years old, with a 5-year gap on her resume, she walked back into a Hollywood that had ruthlessly moved on. The industry that had once bowed to her now looked right through her. To executives, she was no longer the radiant it girl of Love Story. She was damaged goods, a relic from a previous era who had committed the cardinal sin of aging in private. She needed to work to survive, but the phone wasn't ringing. The few offers that trickled in were insults compared to the career she had abandoned.
The rejection fueled a deep, gnawing shame. To quiet the silence in her small rental home, a far cry from the Malibu fortress she had left, she turned to the only comfort available. Alcohol and cocaine became her new companions, numbing the humiliation of scouring for paychecks in a town she used to own. Then, just as she was trying to find her footing, the final blow landed. 2 years after their split, Steve was gone. The diagnosis was mesothelioma, and the end was swift. His death didn't bring the relief of closure, it brought a tidal wave of conflicting grief. Despite the terror he had inflicted, he remained the love of her life. She was left mourning a man who had destroyed her, tortured by the tragic realization that they would never get the chance to grow old sober together. There was no victory in his death, only a hollow silence where the scream of their volatile love had once been. But in that silence, she eventually found a sound she hadn't heard in decades, her own voice. Today, at 85, Ali MacGraw has traded the suffocating smog of Hollywood for the open, healing skies of Santa Fe. She stopped running. She put down the bottle, stopped dyeing her hair, and embraced the silver strands as a crown of survival, refusing to erase the wrinkles that map her journey through fire. There is no desperate grasp for lost youth here, only the quiet dignity of a woman who learned that peace is worth more than fame. She spends her days advocating for animals and practicing yoga, far removed from the red carpets that once defined her worth. The industry labeled her a has-been, but she became something far more powerful, a has-lived. She didn't just survive the King of Cool and the destruction he wrought, she outgrew the need for his shadow entirely. In the end, Steve McQueen may have stolen her prime, but he couldn't keep her spirit. Ali MacGraw reclaimed her soul, proving that the most beautiful love story wasn't the one she acted in, or the one she suffered through. It was the one she finally wrote for herself.